Before we come to the next business, I have a brief statement. This morning, the Government published the Strategic Defence Review. The Prime Minister made a speech and held a press conference in Glasgow, in addition to other media appearances. This shows complete disregard for the House and for the honourable members. I note that ministers, when they were in opposition, were not slow to complain when the previous government made major policy announcements outside Parliament. In government, memories are short on that fact. What has changed? I'll tell you what's changed. Disregard for the members who sit on the back benches. No more of this. Leader.
I responded to an urgent question on a similar matter on the 14th of May. I reiterate the commitments I gave then. I am satisfied that this government is coming to the House regularly to keep Parliament informed.
I'm not satisfied. I think that's the key, because both backbenchers, quite rightly, should hear it first. I don't care how many have been done in the House, it's the ones that's not been done we should be talking about.
Secretary, and I am satisfied. I would point out to colleagues we've got an important second reading debate today, of which there are dozens and dozens of speakers down to speak in. So we are now doing 2 urgent questions before a very important statement and then other business as well. So we do have to try and balance these things.
With the reason we've granted 2 UQs is because we didn't come here with the Strategic Defence Review. Otherwise, we won't be having, and there will be no pressure on time. Jonathan.
That members of industry, representatives of industry, were allowed to see the SDR at 10:30. What? This is a multi-billion-pound industry. That's highly market sensitive, Mr. Speaker.
I'm very if industry have seen this Strategic Defence Review. Members of this House, members of the Select Committee of Defence haven't seen it. There is something fundamentally gone wrong here. I really do believe we need the answers. I'm not under pressure that she goes away, gets some answer, comes back to the House. The fact that journalists have been allowed to see it, but defence people who's got skin in the game before MPs here, I am very, very concerned.
Before this House moved to the next item of business, what unfolded was not a routine procedural exchange. It was a direct political confrontation that exposed deep frustration inside Parliament over how major national decisions are being handled. It began with a brief statement from the Speaker, but the tone immediately signaled something unusual. The government had earlier that morning published the Strategic Defence Review, followed not by an immediate statement in the House, but by a prime ministerial speech in Glasgow, press briefings, and additional media appearances. And that sequencing is exactly what triggered the backlash. The Speaker did not frame this as a minor scheduling issue. He described it as a complete disregard for the House and for elected members who, in his view, were deliberately placed after public announcements and media handling. In Westminster terms, that is a serious accusation because it goes to the core of parliamentary primacy. What made the intervention even more politically charged was the comparison the Speaker drew with the past. He pointed out that when the current governing party was in opposition, they were among the first to criticize previous governments for making major policy announcements outside Parliament. At that time, their argument was consistent: Parliament must come first. But now, in government, that principle appears to have shifted, and the Speaker made that contradiction central to his criticism. He questioned openly what had changed, and then answered it himself. What has changed, he implied, is not procedure, but attitude. A growing disregard for backbench members of Parliament and for the traditional expectation that the House is the first forum for national announcements. The Speaker went further, stating that his role was to defend backbench members who feel increasingly sidelined. That line was not procedural. It was political in tone, highlighting a sense of internal tension within the chamber itself. He made it clear that regardless of how many media appearances or external briefings had taken place, what mattered was what had not happened, Parliament being informed first. As the exchange continued, attempts were made to balance the situation. It was noted that there were already multiple urgent questions scheduled, along with an important second reading debate involving dozens of speakers. The pressure on parliamentary time was acknowledged, but that explanation did little to calm the underlying concern being raised. The government side defended the process, arguing that ministers are regularly coming to the House to keep members informed and that there is an effort to maintain transparency. It was also suggested that urgent questions had been granted precisely because the Strategic Defense Review had not been initially presented in the House, meaning scrutiny was still possible. However, that justification did not resolve the core issue being raised in the chamber. Instead, it shifted the focus toward another, more sensitive concern: information access. One member of Parliament revealed that industry representatives had already been briefed on the Strategic Defense Review earlier in the day at around 10:30 in the morning. That detail immediately changed the tone of the debate, because this was not just about Parliament being slightly delayed, it was about who was informed first. The Strategic Defense Review is not an ordinary policy document. It is a multi-billion-pound, highly sensitive framework with direct implications for national security, defense contracts, and industrial planning. If industry stakeholders had early access while members of Parliament and select committee members were still waiting, that raised immediate questions about prioritization and transparency. The concern expressed in the chamber was clear. If defense industry figures were briefed before Parliament, then the balance between government, lawmakers, and commercial stakeholders may be shifting in a way that undermines parliamentary oversight. This is where frustration escalated further. Members began questioning why elected representatives, particularly those on defense-related committees with direct oversight responsibilities, were not among the first to be informed. The implication was not just administrative oversight, it suggested a breakdown in the expected hierarchy of information flow. One member described the situation as fundamentally wrong, pointing to the fact that people with direct responsibility for scrutiny and accountability were being bypassed, while external stakeholders were given early access to sensitive material. The government response emphasized timing, workload, and procedural constraints. It was argued that the House would receive full details through the appropriate statement later in the day, and that urgent questions were already being addressed. But the sense in the chamber was not fully about timing, it was about trust. Because once Parliament begins to feel that it is being informed after external actors, the issue stops being administrative and becomes constitutional in nature. It raises a fundamental question. Who is Parliament actually holding accountable if it is not the first institution to receive critical national information? The Speaker's earlier intervention now took on greater weight in that context. His emphasis on backbench exclusion, on procedural respect, and on Parliament being informed first framed the entire exchange as more than a dispute over process. It became a broader warning about institutional respect and democratic sequencing. By the end of the exchange, two narratives were running in parallel. The government insisted that Parliament would be properly informed and that procedures were being followed. But a significant number of members remained unconvinced, pointing to contradictions between past criticisms and current practices, and highlighting concerns over industry access and information flow. What remained unresolved was not just the timing of a defense announcement, but the deeper question that emerged from the confrontation: whether Parliament is still the primary forum for national disclosure, or whether that role is gradually being diluted by external briefings and media-first strategies. And in Westminster, once that question is raised in the chamber itself, it does not fade quickly. It lingers, it escalates, and it becomes part of a much larger political argument about power, process, and accountability.